most of what we care about in increasingly cosmopolitan and secular societies is not tied to religion in any direct way. And there are even whole religions like Judaism where you have to look long and hard to find anyone who believes much of anything that is religious. I have literally sat on stage debating what I thought was a religious rabbi who was a conservative rabbi, and when I said something that assumed that he believed in a God who could hear prayers, he threw up his hands and he said, "What makes you think I believe in a God who can hear prayers?" And I was just, I practically lost the debate just in my astonishment. It's like, what does it mean to be a conservative rabbi in this case? There are religions that have made that transition to an increasingly attenuated commitment to the truth of the doctrine, and there are religions who haven't moved an inch, right? And but I think we have to acknowledge that this movement in this direction is progress, because what it actually is at bottom is increasing sensitivity to the difference between having good reasons and bad reasons for what you believe, right? And the fact that this book has been around forever is not a good reason. The fact that Mommy told me so.
It's not a terrible reason, though, because the fact that something has lasted for that length of time at least makes the fact that it's lasted a mystery. And you can't just attribute that to casual politicking or economic circumstances. There's something. Look, the least that you can say about many of the biblical stories is that they're incredibly memorable. And that means that in some sense they're adapted to the memory structures of our minds.
So is the mythology of ancient Greece. It's incredibly memorable.
But I don't
and
disagree with that.
All those gods are dead. The stories still can be useful, but the gods are dead.
But their spirit lives on, let's say.
Yeah, but it lives on in a way that is benign. It lives on in a way where you learn about them in mythology class in school, right? You don't have a fear of Hades drummed into you as a child by your parents.
The other thing that is lacking, as far as I can tell, in the rationalist doctrine, and this is something that I've observed in my clinical practice, and so one of the things that's happened over the last year is that I've had many people, especially ex-soldiers, come to my lectures who have post-traumatic stress disorder, and they say that listening to my lectures, especially the ones on good, evil, and tragedy, there's a particular lecture that I suppose you might think about as devoted to people who have post-traumatic stress disorder, and that the language of good and evil that I lay out in those lectures is actually what allows them to recover from their post-traumatic stress disorder. And dealing with people like that in my clinical practice, the same thing has been the case. If we can't transcend the language of the merely rational and move into an intense conversation about good and evil in some senses, metaphysical realities, we can't enter a realm of seriousness, conceptual seriousness, that's of sufficient depth to help heal someone who's been touched by malevolence. Because that actually is what happens to people with post-traumatic stress disorder, is that inevitably the reason that they're so shattered isn't because something tragic has happened to them, although that does happen upon occasion. It's because someone malevolent has made contact with them, and sometimes that malevolent being, let's say, or malevolent force or spirit, for lack of a better word, is something that resides within them. And so we have these limits on rational, and the reason I'm making this case is because we've already identified another limit of rational discourse. It's like, it doesn't have the motivating power of great fiction and great literature and great poetry, but it also doesn't have the healing power of language that takes the ethical realm to its extreme in some sense. And then the next problem with that, and this is something that Douglas has been contemplating, I would say, is that what evidence do we have that a merely secular representation, a rational representation of our ethic, is going to provide us with a motive force that would be sufficient for us to do such things as identify what's valuable about our culture and be motivated to sufficiently protect it, assuming that there's something worthy of protection.
But we know what a few of those things are, and they have nothing to do with what's on the inside of a church or a synagogue or a mosque. They have to do with things like free speech, right? Like the trench we are all fighting in is, at least one of them, is defense of the free exchange of ideas. And that is put in peril by many kinds of orthodoxies, but some are the old orthodoxies, the blasphemy laws, and the people who want apostates to be killed for leaving, in this case, Islam.